Welcome to another talk. We're going to work a bit on all of me, and I'm going to provide some suggested chord scales to practice. And this gives us the ability to internalize some of the sounds and then improvise and create lines over these type of progressions. So all of me, we're in the key of C. So the very first one to consider would be a C major scale. Okay, but we could reach into other things. We could play notes in between quite a few of those whole steps. So we don't have to restrict ourselves strictly to those notes. So I would recommend exploring those sounds as well, and even playing around with other chord scales, like maybe the Lydian, and you can use some of your knowledge of those chord scales to create lines. Maybe use both the Lydian, which will tend to go in that direction, and then the major scale or Ionian, which will tend to go in that direction. So that gives you a possible line. So it sounds a little chromatic, and you're kind of pulling from both of those chord scales. So to study the chord scale, then you're kind of inside the sound and you know what your options are. All right, let's get into dominant seventh. So I would say if you're really a beginner on the improvisation and the jazz type progressions, I would recommend working on one of two dominant seventh scales for your chord scales, and then branch out from there. So on this particular chord, let's think in terms of the closest thing that we can relate to the key of no sharps and no flats. Now you don't have to understand exactly all of this information, but just kind of listen to the sound of E7. Okay, and if we play in the key of C, but we just raise the G natural to a G sharp, then we're gonna get this kind of sound. Okay, so then we're still really pretty in key, and we've just changed this one note because it's an important tone on the E7, and it makes the chord quality the E7. Okay, otherwise it would be E minor. So that's called Phrygian dominant. Okay, now we get into A7. All right, we're getting into, like we talked about in the harmonic analysis, we're getting into secondary dominance in this part of the progression, and even before. But let's look at this as A7, 5 of the 2 chord. Okay, so then we're going to borrow from the key of 1 flat, and we'll think in terms of the minor, relative minor being D minor. So we have the B flat, okay, and then we have the C sharp, which gives us the A7, okay? So that would be harmonic, D harmonic minor, or A Phrygian dominant. Of course, there are other options on these, and you can take a look at the melody. There's even this note that's going to be outside of that scale. Okay, so if you're trying to fit that in, um, it's not really necessary to do that. You have to take some perspective on what that note is functioning as. But when you're improvising and the melody has finished, you could follow the melody, so you can certainly use that note if you want to. Um, but for purposes of starting out with your improvisation, or continuing on with your journey, the B B flat and C sharp will serve you well. Okay, and now we're into the D minor 7, and we can snap right back into the key of no sharps and no flats. But we want to think about how that relates to that chord. All right, well, let's keep going a bit here. We have E7. So again, 5 of 6. This time the 6 is going to be minor. Okay, so other options there, you can play more of an altered type sound. Maybe incorporate the G natural. Okay. All right, and then we bounce back into A minor. So here we'll keep working at making a little bit of change to the original key signature throughout the tune. But here we can again kind of snap back into the key of no sharps and no flats. Now, once we get into this sound, which is the D13, then we're going to want to adapt again, and we'll borrow from the closely related key of 1 sharp. Okay, so we'll think in terms of that. That would be a good go-to sort of spot. And then we have a D minor. Okay, so again, key of no sharps, no flats. G7, or I just played G13. So again, key of no sharps, no flats, but those chord tones are gonna kind of cry out for a little resolution to C. All right. So again, work with the key of C. This would be known as Mixolydian. Okay. But just a bit of thoughts on that. I'm oftentimes here going to be using the mode names as shorthand for what the chord scale is. But you really don't have to think mode on every change like I showed you here so far. We're really mostly playing in C. We're adapting the scale a bit to accommodate the E7, right? That's using the relative minor, the harmonic minor. And some of these other parts where we're using closely related keys. So on A7, we're tending to think in terms of the key of 1 flat. Okay, so check out the circle of fifths, and you'll see that the keys that we're pulling from so far have either been relative minor or from a relative minor or major in a closely related key. So in this case, 5 of the D, so for D minor, and then the 5 of the G for G major. Let's move into the second half of the tune, actually the very end of the tune, the last 8 measures, because we did talk about the next 8 bars already at the beginning of the tune. So we'll move to the 4 chord. So we have F6. So here, very simple. We'll just stay in the key of no sharps, no flats. But we'll just anchor our ear on the F and think in those terms. So you're going to have a sharp 11 relative to the root note. Okay. Next up, we're going to get into some melodic minor type scales or chord scales and things. So the chord goes to F minor. So the 4 minor, it's very common to follow the 4 major with a 4 minor type chord. So what we're going to pull from here is the F melodic minor scale. All right, so that just gives us the flat third, which we need for the chord quality, the natural 11, which is kind of a pleasant sound on the minor chord, and then up from there, we're just staying with the key. So the original key, no sharps, no flats. So the more that we can stay with the original key, the better, and then we make adaptations to the chord changes as we go. Okay, E minor 7 and A7. Let's pair this up a bit here and talk about it. Talk about these two kind of together. So we know we form a 2-5 that is tending to go to D, but since the tune has a D minor here, let's work with the D minor melodic scale. So again, okay, so that will help us to accommodate the C sharp of the A7 again, while keeping most of the other notes just the same as the key of C. And that will work pretty compatibly with E minor 7 as well. All right, and then we get to D minor. So here we're back. C naturals. Okay, and G7 again. And then back to the C. Okay. Now sometimes you might get a chord progression that goes something like this, and then a little turnaround at the end. So there you might pull from the you may even think of D in terms of the D7. A lot of folks will think in terms of the minor third distances on the E flat. Okay, and then we have a regular kind of 2-5 back to the beginning. All right, well, thanks so much for listening to this talk. I do appreciate it. And let me know if you have any questions down in the comments, or reach me at the YouTube channel if you're not already listening there. And I will mention that this is available as a video to the members of the lessons and talks, but I do make my best effort to keep this 100% audio friendly. All right, everybody. We'll have a great practice session. I'll see you all in the next one.